Can I extend you a warm welcome to you all to this meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee this afternoon. To begin with, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest at all this afternoon on any item? No? Can't see anybody's hand up. And can I ask if you have a list of who can't be here this afternoon and when? Thank you. We've had one apology this afternoon by Councillor Robin Williams, the portfolio holder for resources. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the names that I have on the committee now. So if you could just introduce yourselves or call your names out. I'll start with Geraint Bebb. Good afternoon. Happy to be here this afternoon. Neville Evans. Good afternoon, everyone. David Wynne Jones. Good afternoon, everyone. Jackie Lewis. Good afternoon. Theo Owen. Good afternoon. Alwyn Watkin. Good afternoon, everyone. Arfon Wynne. Good afternoon, everyone. David Roberts in attendance. Keith Roberts.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Douglas M. Fowley.
Good afternoon.
Well done. Aled Morris Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Robert Llewellyn Jones, I'm here as well. Okay. So there are no declarations of interest on what's on the agenda this afternoon. Okay, so before we begin, can I just say a word of thanks to the former Councillor Aled Morris Jones for the work he's done on the committee over the years, former chair, in the scrutiny role. He did an excellent job, fair play, worked hard, and I'm thankful to him and happy for him to be on this committee to have an input into what we're doing. So thank you to everyone who has worked so hard in the past on this committee. Turning now to the minutes of the previous meeting. We have 3 sets of minutes, 28th of February, 7th of March and 31st of May. Is there anyone willing to propose that they are a true record?
I will propose the 28th of February since I was there and my former role.
Thank you. Is anyone second? Councillor Aled Morris Jones seconds. 7th of March then? Anyone willing to propose those? Proposed by Councillor Aled Morris Jones. Seconded by anyone? Was there anyone else in this committee?
No, there isn't in that one.
I was in attendance, but I wasn't a member of the committee at the time, but I am a member now, so I'm not sure if I can second or not. It is a true record anyway. In the same way, I was a member of the committee at the time, but I'm not a member of the committee now, so I'm not sure if I have the right to do so either. Is that okay, Anwen? What you're proposing this afternoon is the minutes themselves rather than the accuracy. So the advice we've had from the legal team is that's acceptable for you to do so, that you accept the proposal for other minutes rather than the accuracy of the minutes, which is now historical anyway. Thank you. Okay, thank you. That's been passed then. Thank you very much for that. The third item on the agenda is monitoring performance, the corporate scorecard for Q4 2021-22. Apologies to cut across. Would it be possible for us to go through the roll call of the officers that are in attendance before you go on to the item on the scorecard, please? Good idea. So can I ask people to introduce themselves, or can you give the names out, please, Anwen? Thank you, no problem. Good afternoon as a committee. Dylan Williams, the Chief Executive, is in attendance. Good afternoon, everyone. Rhys Hughes, the Deputy Chief Executive. Good afternoon. Lynn Ball, Monitoring Officer. Thank you, Anwen. Good afternoon. Vaughan Roberts, the Director of Social Services. Good afternoon, everyone. Arwel Winowen, the Head of Adult Services. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies, my camera isn't working this afternoon. Ned Michael, Head of Housing. Good afternoon. Caris Edwards, Head of Professional HR and Transformation. Good afternoon. Gethin Morgan, Transformation Manager and Projects and Programs. Good afternoon. Dewi Francis Jones, the Manager responsible for the planning section. Good afternoon. Gwyndaf Parry from the Highways, Property and Waste Department. Good afternoon. And I think we've got everyone there, apart from myself, Anna Davis, Scrutiny Manager, and Mrs. Anne Holmes is taking the minutes. So over to you, Chair. Anwen, sorry, Mark Jones, Section 151 Officer, I am in attendance as well. Apologies, Mark. And Bethan Griffith, Business Manager for Democratic Services as well. Apologies, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for that and being in attendance this afternoon to help us out. So I think now it's okay to go to the third item on the agenda. This is the monitoring performance corporate scorecard Q4 to present the report of the head of profession HR and corporate transformation. Chair, can I just come in quickly? Apologies. It's Dylan speaking. Just as this is the first meeting that we are virtual, is it worth just noting who is here from the executive also, just so everyone gets a full picture? The officers and members of the committee have been named, and then I think we'll have had everyone who is in attendance before we go into the business. Maybe if Anwen could just go through the list. Yes, if you can, please, Anwen. No problem. So we have Councillor Llino Smedi, Leader of the Council. Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Carwyn Jones. Good afternoon. Councillor David Rhys Thomas. Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Alan Roberts. Good afternoon. Councillor Gary Pritchard. Good afternoon, everyone. And I think that is everyone. Sorry, Councillor Alan Mummery also. Yes, I think he's in attendance, but on mute, I think. And I think those are the members of the executive that are in attendance. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anwen, for that. I think it's now okay for us to go on to item 3 on the agenda. So what we have here is the corporate scorecard. It's a very important item. So I'll just read it out, what I've got in front of me.
report of 21-22 and the first of the current administration. It portrays the position of the Council against its operational objectives as outlined and agreed earlier in the year. The committee is requested to scrutinise the scoreboard and note the areas which the strategic leadership team are managing to secure improvements into the future. These can be summarised as follows. Underperformance is recognised and managed with mitigation measures completed to aid improvements into 22 and 23. The committee is asked to recommend the mitigation measures outlined above.
So this is a very important report, as I said, and this is what we'll have to take attention of to see how the performance of the council is in the year ahead of us. So I'll read the third paragraph, which is in the report. So we're all new to this. So
to assess members when scrutinising the topic, the impact the matter has on individuals and communities. They look at the
very important.
effectiveness of any proposed change, both financially and in terms of quality. They look at any risks. Scrutiny taking a performance monitoring or quality assurance role. Looking at plans and proposals from a perspective of long-term prevention, integration, collaboration, and involvement. The potential impacts the decisions will have on protected groups under the Equality Act 2010, those experiencing socio-economic disadvantage in their lives when making strategic decisions. Opportunities for people to use the Welsh language and treating the Welsh language no less favorably than the English language. Guiding principles.
Those are the guiding principles of scrutiny members. We'll have to make sure that we keep to those. As I've said, this is an important committee, and it's up to us as the members now to look at how the council is progressing, and if there is something we should know about, that we bring it up and ask our officers and executive to look in more detail on what's going on. As I said, we have to make sure that we look in detail at what's going on and help the people of Anglesey to make sure that they get the proper representation of everything we've got before us. So the key scrutiny questions today are:
the council performance during Q4 21-22 and reports a positive picture. What areas of performance will need focus during 22-23 and beyond? The report discusses the performance of our child protection arrangements, CPR. What assurances can be given to the committee that children and family services are addressing the issue?
That's very important, isn't it? See councils across the country. That's something that does come up quite often. So we have to make sure that we look in detail at what's going on. And third,
group, what steps are in place to improve our recycling rates?
So that's very important as well.
So
I'm going to ask you now to one of our officers who's going to present the report. Councillor Davies Thomas. Correct.
Yeah. Right. Okay. A portfolio holder,
The portfolio holder for this is Robin Williams. Yes, I'll explain. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon. If you can all hear me properly, I just had some problems with the technology this morning. We can all hear you now. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And to begin with, I must apologise for those of you who are fed up of hearing me talking about the scorecard over the last 5 years, especially the officers. Unfortunately, Councillor Robin Williams can't be with us this afternoon, but it's a pleasure for me to present the corporate scorecard for Q4 2021-22. And as usual, I'd like to thank Gethin and Alwyn for preparing the report and collecting all the data for us. It's very good to see a lot of new faces on the Scrutiny Committee, and maybe they'll be able to look at things in maybe a little bit differently and ask different questions as well of us. If you like, what we've got here is a snapshot of the way the council has been performing during Q4 and the end of the last financial year. The situation is a positive one, with 90% of the corporate indicators showing good against the targets. I'm not going to mention specific sections of the corporate scorecard. I think it's up to the committee to see where we've had success and the things that maybe haven't gone as well and we haven't achieved our targets. To finish, after having looked in detail of the scorecard of the last 5 years, I think gradual progress has been made, and I'd like to see quicker progress, of course, but of course there is background of austerity, and maybe there'll be more austerity to come, and of course the effect of COVID on our services. So I'll give the scorecard back to the chair to go through it. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, if we look now, it's maybe an idea to go through it page by page. So if you could turn to the corporate's monitoring report on page 20, Council's plan for 2017 to 2022.
It sets out the Council's aims for the period in conjunction with the annual delivery document and more recently the transitional plan. Within this quarterly scorecard monitoring report is used to summarise key performance indicators, a combination of local and nationally set indicators. It delivers the Council's day-to-day activities. The report also identifies any mitigating actions identified by the strategic leadership team to drive and secure improvements. Thirdly, the scorecard portrays the end-of-year positions and will, together with this report, be considered further by the Corporate Scrutiny Committee and the Executive during June 22 and Yedihina. So this is obviously, I hope, something that we as a new committee will need to understand the way that this committee, Scrutiny Committee, works. As I've said before, this is a very important committee, and we do have to ensure that all of our services that we provide for the people of Anglesey are being done in a proper manner. We don't want any surprises, so we do ask the officers to bring anything that they have concerns about to the attention of the executive and of our good selves, so that we can deal with them straight away. We've heard so often in various other councils in the country where things have gone skewed because they haven't been scrutinised in good time and been adjusted. So we need to know immediately if there is any shortcomings on any of the services we provide for the people of Ennismore to ensure that we bring them into line again. As I say, we are there to help the executive, to help the officers, and to to act as a safeguard to whatever could go wrong. So it will reflect on us as a scrutiny committee if things aren't set in place, that we are not doing our job properly. So it's very, very important that we do take this work very seriously, and hopefully we can help the officers and the executive in their day-to-day business. So without any further ado, if you look at page 20, is there anything that anybody would like to bring up on page 20?
Can I
come in here, please, Chair? It's Dyfed here speaking. Just thinking, because going back now to the key scrutiny questions that you mentioned, and I think for us, and I think other members of the committee, of looking at the scorecard itself, and for people like myself, colours always assist, but I think while we are here, obviously, to be a critical friend, if you like, I think what's important and what jumps out all of the time is the red colours and maybe the amber as well. So I think if there are some of those, and maybe some of the office who could give us a little bit of context to those matters that are red or amber. So I'm choosing really the one that jumps out to me here is in relation to the percentage of waste that has been recycled and composted. That is red, so I'm not sure if that's one we could begin with, maybe. Just cutting across you now. So what I was going to bring those in later on, but try to go through what we've got first of all. Apologies. So on page 21.
It is encouraging to note that a majority, 92% of the indicators monitoring within the section perform well against targets, green or yellow, with some of the highlights are noted below. 92%, felly mae 8%.
So there are 8% that are not performing well. We'll have to look at that. As has been said, those have been targeted as red, probably.
The council is green against the staff absence management target, with 8.73 days lost to absence per full FTE. Full FTE. Be hwnna'n fel arfer?
What's FTE?
Full-time equivalent.
That's full-time equivalent. That's the meaning of an FTE.
Full-time equivalent in the year against a target of 8.75 days lost in absence per full-time equivalent. There was a marked improvement against targets during waterfall.
So hopefully you've all read this report, because it's important, isn't it, to make sure. Will there be training for the committee on this, Mrs. Davis? I can confirm that there are arrangements happening for training to be conducted for both scrutiny committees, and obviously the specific areas that both committees are looking at will be part of the training programme as we move forward. It's important, isn't it, because it's new for everyone. It's new for me and a lot of people who are members of this committee. So as I say, just looking at this now, performance management. And if we turn to page 23.
Included the adult services indicators are all green against targets and have all improved bar one against their performance in 2021. In a time where the services has been under pressure because of the pandemic, this is encouraging and bodes well for 22-23.
It was very difficult for people who were working with the pandemic, but the social services did do very well to be green in most of the targets. So well done to them.
Housing services also demonstrated good performance and with both green against targets in per year. Use of Welsh Government funding has been essential in allowing this to happen, as well as the commitment of staff to ensure that our people are prevented from becoming homeless. Da iawn i'r adran tai.
So well done to the housing department there as well. But there we are, we go.
One indicator has underperformed against target for the year. One of the indicator 23.
This is indicator 23.
Were on the CPR during the year and who were deregistered during the year is amber with performance of 318 days against a target of 270 days. The performance is a slight improvement against the 321 days seen at the end of Q3. However, is a decline on the 258 days reported at the end of 2021. But in
and that isn't very good, and we'll have to make sure that we look in detail at what's happening there.
48 on the register who have been on the register longer than 7 months. These cases are complex by their nature, and many of these children are subject to public law outfit, whilst the remaining are discussed regularly in legal gateway meetings. All cases that meet the strict criteria for removal from the register have and will be deregistered when it is appropriate to do so.
Again, we'll have to make sure that they have the priorities and work through those.
Well-being objectives 3, where we are working in partnership with our communities to ensure that they can cope effectively with change and developments, which protecting our natural environment also demonstrated good performance for the year. Only 2 indicators, 20% of the 10 indicators, with targets underperformed against their annual targets. Right, but then,
so hopefully everyone has read the report just to make sure that they understand what's going on with the different indicators. So if we'll turn now to the table that we have in front of us to see what's read and how those work. John, do you want to come in on this? It's David Jones. No, that's fine. John Jones is fine. John Jones. David Jones. Thank you, Chair, and apologies for cutting in earlier and jumping the gun a little bit. I was just going to give a little bit of background. No, thank you, appreciate that. But as I said earlier, the scorecard is to be praised, obviously. 92% is excellent. But obviously, as we are here as a committee to scrutinise and to look at different elements, I am the red ones are jumping out at me, and maybe just to get a little bit of context, I think it is to them, and as I said, give the opportunity to some of the officers to respond, and that goes back to the key scrutiny questions, the first one in a way, in relation to what and how we look at the year to come and the priorities that there are, and obviously we are looking at those that are red and maybe amber as well before we move forward. So I'm not sure if, and again, apologies if I'm maybe not following the usual process, but is it an opportunity now maybe if we want to, Chair, if you think we should go through the list and pick out maybe those that are in need of a little bit more response maybe, rather than just going through the whole list of the green ones we accept. The green is good. We praise that, of course, and maybe those are amber and red, maybe, and ask the relevant officers or the portfolio holders to respond. Yes, no problem. We'll begin then with the first one. Who would be the officer that's dealing with this one? Who's the officer dealing with these? Everyone's very quiet. Have we gone down to numbers of the aims? Which one are we going straight down to 23 then? The average length of time for children who were on the CPR during the year and who were deregistered during the year of days. That was social services, wasn't it? Can the social services officer come in on that one then to give us the information? Yes, no problem. Happy to do that. Yes, as was mentioned earlier, that you don't like surprises in these meetings, we were aware that this had taken us over the threshold into the amber in the last meeting in March, so we are aware, and as is explained in the report, we are aware of how many children have been on the register longer than 7 months. And the way to explain this, there is a clear threshold on how we get children on the register, and obviously there's a threshold and a clear and positive process to get children off the register. So if we took children off the register outside of the national process, obviously that creates a risk for us as a council. So the fact that there are 14 children that have been on the list longer than 7 months out of 48 children. So if your data and sums people, the least children we have on the register, that's a good thing. And the most children staying on the register longer, of course, it's going to have an effect on the scorecard. So the more children there are, obviously, the more chance that there are less children on the register for less than 7 months. So there are processes in place, and I would never recommend for us to take children off the register because it is a multidisciplinary decision with people sitting around the table discussing these complex issues. This trend seems to be regional, definitely. We are seeing more children staying on the register that are a little bit longer, and also what we have as a fallback here is those 14 children are being managed, if you like, under what we call public law outline. And I am aware that that's quite a technical term, and what that is a process outside the courts, which just before we go to court, where we work with families and with solicitors to try and get them to work in the way that the child protection plan is in place. So this figure will change during Q1 of this year because we have one child or one family coming off the register next month, which is a success, and we've got a couple of families which are into that court process formally, so the figures will change. So you must remember here as well, we are talking about children who have been harmed at home, the most vulnerable children, if you like. We can't rush or take children off the register too early, or obviously that creates a risk for us. Also, maybe for those of you who aren't aware, this was put on the corporate scorecard because historically, I'm going back, before 2016 now, but the number on the register, there were a number of children on the register over 7 months. So what CIW were telling us at the time is there were elements of risk in those cases. They weren't acted upon. So we're in a different situation now. And probably if we'd look at the corporate scorecard for the future, maybe this would need to be there because the numbers are so low. But I, as a director I'm aware of the cases, and I have discussions regarding why they're on the register and why they're not coming off the register. And as I said, this isn't a performance indicator. Maybe you could tag it as a bad news story because it's amber, if that makes sense. It's something that's sensible to have and good. It's good that we have it, really. So that's the context. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them, but I am aware that it's quite a technical area, and there will be training sessions for you regarding things like this moving forward, but I hope I've simplified it as far as possible for this purpose, but happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? There are two hands up, Councillor David Roberts and Councillor Dyfed Jones. Okay, David, do you want to come in? Yes, I was just listening to the response from Vaughan, and obviously it's an area which I haven't gone into as much detail previously, but, you know, would putting more resources into the department mean that we could turn the indicator green? Is it a matter of resources or just a matter of process? And when we work with other agencies, everything's not within your hands, is it? Is there a lack of resources? It's an interesting question and a good question, really. There's always a lack of resources, if you like, because what we haven't got the control over is when we can get access to some types of resources in the health pod, for example. So that can be an element, but being on the register doesn't enable people to get more resources to work with them. It can be an element, and probably in these specific cases, what we've had is complex cases which have taken a lot of collaboration, and you have to remember also a lot of the families that have children on their registers don't agree with that registration, so it takes time sometimes for the family to understand they have to work with us, and that's, you know, it's statutory, they have to work with us, and those are the words that take a while for people to understand, and sometimes the social worker falls out with a social worker. But the complexity here has been mental health issues, welfare, and that there are many elements to the reason why those individuals are on the register. And we also have to remember, when I looked at the age, you know, they are children of the older primary school age, where a lot of these children, so children with needs that was quite complex, quite additional needs to those that wouldn't be on the register, if I can put it like that. But yes, that can be a factor, but in this case, it probably isn't in the top 5 factors, if you like. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Are you happy with that, David? Yes. Thank you, Vaughan. That's a good explanation, because I think the question I would ask then is it something on a scorecard, for example, where there are numbers? Your explanation there said, well, taking children off the register, if that happens too early, that's not something to celebrate. Not that we celebrate, but it's not something to praise in a way, is it? Oh, that's one down there. If it happened too early or for the wrong reasons, it's not something, for me personally, it's not something to celebrate, and it's difficult to look at that as being amber or green. It's not like we've failed to recycle or whatever. It's a totally different scenario. But the explanation does help from my perspective. Thank you. But it's something very difficult to mark, isn't it? As regards success, if that's the word. Yes, we're going back to what I said earlier. There are 2 elements of the scorecard which refer to children's services, which are to do with where the service was historically. So you've got the children on the register, so those were serious issues in the past that hadn't had attention historically, but obviously they've been on the scorecard and now we're around where we should be. So there's a reason why it's there. We understand it, and moving to the future, we can maybe look at a different way of reporting on it to get to the core of the matters in the service. But definitely there is a reason why they're there. Thank you. Thank you. This will probably come up in one of the panels as well, won't it, for it to look into more detail on it. Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to bring anything up on the scorecard? Looking. Anyone else want to bring something else on the scorecard?
Cadeirydd, Ma'r cynghorydd Keith
Chair,
Roberts.
Councillor Keith Roberts has put his hand up wanting to ask a question, I think.
Keith yn hwnna, dyma Keith yna. Oh yeah, I won't. I can see now, Keith. Yeah.
Okay, you can see my hand as well.
Yeah, yes. Come forward.
Right. Okay. No. We're looking at the summary of the scorecard. Obviously, the scorecard is giving us a summary of what's happened in 21-22. It's quite not a bad scorecard, but there are items there that we should be looking at with regards to how we go on in 22-23, which is the year that we're in now. So the likes of planning appeals interest me. That they're down for dismissal, and perhaps that could be brought up as a factor, because it is shown in red and it is down, as well as recycled and compost waste. So to explain that, what's going on with regards to these two, I'd like to hear from the officers concerned.
Can
the officer come forward to say what Keith wants to hear? Who is the officer? Yes, I can answer that point on the targets and the recycling rates. So as is noted on the scorecard, we are behind the targets, the statutory targets for achieving the target of 64% for 21-22. That's because the main reason for that is that we presented the green waste service and charged for that, and we've lost almost 2,000 tonnes less of green waste that we collect and recycle as a result of that, and also more waste has been collected in the black bin recently in the last year or two. But I think what is important to emphasise is the steps that we've put in place, and maybe that's what you've got an interest in, so that we respond to these points, and that we have since almost 6 months now been working with an organisation called RAP Cymru, and RAP Cymru is an organisation which is funded by Welsh Government to work with county councils to help recycle the recycling rates to contribute to a national rate of Welsh Government. So we've been working with that organisation, and they've been up here on Anglesey earlier this year reviewing our waste services, and they've been in Penhesgyn and Gwalchmai, and also following with Biffa to see how the service works. They will be returning in the summer also to get a better idea of the situation, and also to understand what the effect of tourism is and visitors and the effect they have on the waste that is produced. And then following that visit, we will be receiving recommendations from them then, and on the changes that we could put in place in order to help us to increase the recycling rates and to increase the recycling that we collect. And then we'll be looking at those recommendations and putting those into practice to increase those recycling rates and helping us achieve those targets.
Obviously, this is work in progress, and they are getting help from elsewhere. But hopefully it'll be something that one of the panels will look at, because we have had a good history of collecting waste in Anglesey. We've been top of the list on a couple of occasions. So we need to perhaps just look at it again and see where we can improve on various things on it. It's something that one of the panels can be looking at anyway in the future.
So thank you for that.
I was also, Chair, I was also interested to know why the percentage of planning appeals that have been dismissed has gone down as well. That was the second part of my question.
Second, okay. Well, who's in? Have we got the planning? Dewi Francis there?
Yes, good afternoon. Yes, just a few points I'd like to raise. First of all, as you can see from the report, we are talking about very small numbers in terms of the reviews. We're talking about 10. And of course, that means that the statistics can change considerably from case to case. It should also be noted that these appeals are decided by the planning inspectorate, so it's not the council who decide on these appeals. So to a degree it is outside our control. I also think it's worth emphasising that a lot of planning decisions are subjective and are open to interpretation. You know, they're not black and white decisions very often. I have looked through the appeals decided this year. They vary in terms of the developments, so there aren't really any clear tendencies or patterns that we can identify that, you know, raise any specific concerns for us in terms of how we're going to try to improve and mitigate. We have strengthened the planning team recently. We have a new manager in place, and also new team members have joined. There's a continuous process now in place where officers review these appeal decisions to see if there are any lessons to be learned. And there's also a training programme on planning issues that will be rolled out for officers and elected members. So I'm afraid we'll have to accept that we're unlikely to win every appeal. There's an element of professional judgment linked to these appeals. But at the moment, you know, because the appeals are so different in terms of the developments, you know, there aren't any tendencies that suggest that there's something wrong in how we interpret the policies. Are you happy with that reply, Keith?
Yes, by all means, it does clarify the situation, and that's what we're looking at for this future years, is to clarify what's been summarised to us up to the past year as well.
Yeah, it's possible, of course, that some of these plans now, with the pressure on the environment and things like this, that the officers have quite a difficult task to do to ensure that they abide by the rules that are coming out from Cardiff all the time. So that might be part of the problem as well. Anyway, thank you, Keith, for your questions. Right, anybody else like to raise anything? I see some hands up here. Can I ask Neville Jones?
Yeah, diolch, Mr Cadeirydd.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that explanation about planning. it just confirmed what I thought the reason was. I want to go back to a matter we were discussing earlier, which is recycling. I'd just like to ask the officer, well, actually, I've got two questions for the officer. If I remember correctly, I'm very familiar with the scorecard based on my former life. Are there any financial penalties or sanctions if we fail to meet some of these targets? And the second question is, I noted what he said about the increase because of tourism. I think we all realise how much of an increase there has been on the island in terms of tourism over the last 2 years since the COVID pandemic. So I think that's something that we as a scrutiny committee should look at in a lot more detail once this investigation has been conducted, and to look at what effect that is having on the way service. So I think there were 2 points there. Thank you. Thank you, Neville. So who's going to respond? Does Dylan Williams want to speak first? Yes, if I may, Chair. That's a very good question. At the moment, the intention is to complete the research that RAP Cymru is undertaking. They're going through some of the bins. They're looking at what's being collected. That will then give us a baseline. And I think to respond to Councillor Evans' comments, I think we need further research to see what's happening in the private sector and how the commercial sector has adapted. We all know that 300,000 people might have been on Anglesey during the summer months over the last 2 years compared to 70,000 people throughout the year. So that is going to have an impact. At the moment, we're just speculating. We don't have any evidence. But I assume, once the RAP work has reached a level of maturity, we can present it to you as a specific item, and perhaps we could spend a meeting looking at it in detail. It is an important issue. Of course, it's linked to climate change, and there are statutory requirements on the council, and we do need to reach that 70% as soon as possible, and I think everybody's committed to that. Gwyntaf, I'm not sure if you want to add anything. I was sorry for interrupting. Yes, I agree. And just to respond to the question about fines, 21-22 did have a statutory target of 64%, and then the next one is in 2025 with 75%. There is a possibility of being fined because we didn't reach the 64% target. But I think what the Welsh Government looks at is whether we have plans in place. There are plans to review the service and how to reach the target in future. Because we have now been working with RAP Cymru for 6 months, I think we're in a strong position. But over the next period, we will be having discussions with the Welsh Government about how we respond to the fact that we didn't reach the statutory targets. Thank you for those responses. So are you happy now, Neville? Yes, thank you for both of those responses. Certainly, I agree with the Chief Executive that this is something we need to revisit when more information is available. But thank you for the responses. Yes, does Leo want to come in now? I think David had his hand up first if he wants to go first. Well, I wanted to go back to planning actually, but I do have some points about recycling or waste as well, because a member of this committee does sit on the working group. I know we'll be appointing people to panels in the next item, but I think we do need to nominate somebody for the waste working group or task force. But what I was interested in was the split between applications decided through delegated powers and the number of applications that are decided by the planning committee that then go to appeal. So out of all the appeals or applications that go through the system every year, what's the percentage that goes to appeal? And do we need to be worried about it? And how does it compare with other counties? As it happens, from the 10 appeals in question, 8 were decisions made by officers and 2 by the planning committee, which gives you an idea of the balance. We deal with over 1,000 applications every year, and it's only 10 appeals, so it isn't a very high percentage of all the work that comes through the doors of the planning service. In terms of how we compare with other authorities, well, unfortunately, there aren't any statistics available at the moment. The government has decided not to collect these or gather these statistics over COVID, but I understand that the work will be restarting soon. I am aware of the situation in the region, in the North Wales region, and to be honest, it's similar. It's difficult to give you a definite answer because, you know, there's so much variety in the cases and it's hard to find any patterns. Chia, do you want to come in now? The question I have is about an indicator that is green. It's about homelessness, indicator 26. I think that's due to funding from the Welsh Government. So will that funding still be there in future so that that high percentage continues? You know, that's great if it does, you know, but if the funding won't be there, how do we work towards ensuring that the figure stays high? Would you like me to come in, Chair? Yes, thank you. Ned Michael. It is a concern. As you're all aware, the number of individuals we have in emergency accommodation is much higher than it has been historically. And thankfully, the Welsh Government has been providing a lot of funding to fund this situation. And that's why we've succeeded in getting this result. We have no long-term assurance that that funding will be available at the same level. Certainly for 22-23, the Welsh Government have said that they will continue because the vision is they don't want to leave anybody out. As a service, we're aware of the important work being done and we try our best within our resources to ensure that we have the staffing levels. You know, one request I want is for some funding from the reserves to maintain the staffing levels over the next year. The need for accommodation won't disappear overnight. And it's true that there is additional pressure. For example, you know, we have refugees from Ukraine coming into the country who need accommodation. So there's going to be more demand. Thank you for that. Chia, are you happy with that answer? Yes, thank you. And thank you for your work. You know, that percentage is excellent. I can't see any other hands up. There is one thing I want to discuss, customer services. The total percentage of written responses to complaints within 15 days in the social services. You know, it's a very important issue for the public. You know, if they don't get a response to complaints, you know, perhaps they could just receive a letter to say that the council is looking into the issue. So what do you have to say about that? Vaughan Roberts. What this doesn't explain to you, it doesn't give you the whole story or the big picture in a way. So we have to follow a timetable. Say we receive a complaint today, that's day one. Then we have 5 days to contact the individual, and we do that quite quickly. We do that on the same day or on the second day, usually. What we've noticed is that some of the complaints, you know, include a number of sub-complaints in a way. You know, rather than someone phoning up and making complaints about a single issue, they will include a number of issues. So, after having a discussion with the individual and, you know, proposing improvements or a resolution, the officer then might not send that response in writing to the complainant. You know, sometimes the officer dealing with a complaint has to have a further discussion with social workers. So if we feel that we can't meet the timetable for responding, we do ask the individuals if they're happy to receive a response outside that time frame. You know, sometimes looking at this, people think that we don't respond to complaints. We do respond, but we don't want to rush the response either. The number of letters that we send out has increased, and perhaps what will give you assurance, and going back to the historical situation, a lot of complaints that used to come into the service were very valid, saying that they didn't receive the best service. You know, every time we don't actually agree with a complaint and we go back to the individuals, perhaps to tell them that there is no basis to their complaint. But this is down to work pressure. We have one service manager whose service might receive more complaints. You know, if you think about children on the child protection register, for example, well, in many of those cases, you might have families who don't really want us to intervene in their families. But we have improved. And now, rather than one service manager receiving the complaints about their service, we do share the responsibility for responding to complaints. We share them out amongst the service managers rather than asking one officer to deal with every request. Are most of these letters, or are they emails? You can send an email. A lot of our complaints come through the complaints officer. They phone up to make a complaint. Sometimes we receive a letter or an email, but most often people phone wanting a discussion with a relevant officer, and then they might make a complaint over the phone. Is Gethin Morgan the author of this report here today. Gethin, thank you for the work you've completed on this report on the scorecard. When an indicator is given green, what sort of evidence do you have to support that judgment? You know, what sorts of facts do you receive and how do you do the ratings? You might be aware we have 4 colours that we use, and there are different thresholds that are used to highlight performance. It's all based on attainment against targets, and as a result, you know, if a target, we lose the figure of 10. If the target is 10 and performance is within 5% of that 10, it's yellow. If it's more than 10%, it's green. If it's missed by 10% or more, it'll be red. And if it's 5 to 10%, it's amber, and then it's green if it's less than 5%. I hope that explains how we reach these ratings. So what I'm asking is, as chair of this scrutiny committee, I'd like to come over to see how you actually do it. Would that be possible, Gethin? Yes, no problem at all. The only caveat is that it's extremely technical. Well, I might learn something from you. But I will do that over the next 2 weeks, if I may. So, are there any other questions on this report, or are you happy for us to move forward to the recommendations? So the committee is requested to scrutinise the scorecard and note the areas which the strategic leadership team are managing to secure improvement into the future. Underperformance is recognised and managed with mitigation measures completed to aid improvements in 2022-23. I'll read that out again. Underperformance is recognised and managed with mitigation measures completed to aid improvement into 2022-23. And then the committee is asked to accept the mitigation measure outlined above. So does anyone propose those recommendations? Is there a proposer? Yes, I'm happy to propose. Thank you, Councillor Dyfed-Jones. Is there a seconder? And does everybody agree? Please show if you don't agree. So everybody's happy with the recommendation. Of course, I've read out the recommendations and you've accepted them. Thank you, everybody, for that. So we'll turn now to the next item, and that is nomination of scrutiny members to serve on panels. It's the report of the Director of Function and the Scrutiny Manager. So who's going to present the report? Can I just confirm, Chair, although the report is in my name, the author is Anwen Davis, the Scrutiny Manager, and she'll be presenting the main points in terms of the requirements of the committee today.
Right. Panel scrutiny.
Right, scrutiny panels. So, as you know, we have 2 scrutiny committees. I'm the chair of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, which is this committee, and then Councillor Delaris is the chair of the Partnership and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. So, can I ask you to look at the recommendations So both scrutiny committees are requested to nominate 4 members to serve on the Social Services Scrutiny Panel and the Corporate Parenting Panel, 3 members to serve on the Finance Scrutiny Panel and 4 members to serve on the Education Scrutiny Panel. So I think we need 11 members in all from this committee to sit on the panels. I have noted that some councillors have shown an interest in being on some of these panels. I've got Dyfed Jones, Alwyn Watkin, Arfon Wyn, Geraint Sbeb, Llion Harad Owen and David Roberts, who've shown an interest in sitting on some of these panels. But can I just ask? Oh, Keith, you still have your hand up. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm just showing my interest in the panels, Chair.
Okay.
Since I wasn't at the last meeting, due to being at another one.
Okay. Right, okay, dan ni am yr un gyntaf mi dan ni isio 4 o...
So first of all, we need 4 members to serve on the Social Services Scrutiny Panel. Can I have some names, please? Does anybody want to put their names forward? You can raise your hands if you wish. Chair, Councillor Neville Evans has his hand up, or has raised his hand. Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in being a member of the Social Services Scrutiny Panel. Okay, so we'll take Neville. Anybody else for the Social Services Scrutiny Panel? Chair, Councillor Llio Angharad Owen has raised her hand. Anybody else for the Social Services Panel? We need 2 more. Anybody else? Chair, Councillor Jackie Lewis has raised her hand. Oh, I can see you in the corner there now, Jackie. And 1 more. So this is for the Social Services Scrutiny Panel. We only need 1 more member. Any other hands up? Anybody else want to raise their hands? We must have 1 other member. Chair. You know, do you want to give people some time to think about it and to get in touch with you? Well, I'd prefer to get it out of the way now. So we need 1 other member for the Social Services Scrutiny Panel. You know, it's an important role. I think everybody should be raising their hands for this one. Jackie, you've already raised your hand, have you? Yes, I have, Chair. So I think we've got 4 now. I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair. We've actually got 3 names. Just to confirm, 3 names for the Social Services Panel. Perhaps if we move on to the Finance Panel, then we'll come back. I've got 4. Neville Evans, Llio Angharad Owen, and Jackie Lewis.
Okay, mae'n gynnu 3, da ni eisiau 1 arall, dweud. So rwy'n yn barod i enwi hynny? Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, I can see now we need one more. Chair, Councillor Alwen Watkin has a hand up.
Alwen Watkin. Champion o na fo. Diolch yn fawr, mae bedwar yma na wan. Ar yr cyllid wan.
Thank you. We've got 4 names for that panel now. Okay, so we need 3 members to serve on the Finance Scrutiny panel. Yes, Chair. It's Councillor David Roberts. I've got my hand up, and Councillor Geraint Speb also has his hand up for the Finance Scrutiny panel.
Mae ddrwg gen i Cynghorydd Jones, da chi ar mute?
I'm sorry, Councillor Jones, but you're on mute.
Cynghorydd Jones, mae ddrwg gen i, da chi ar mute?
Na, dwi'n ddim sydd ar ryw, na dwi'n gwe.
I'm not sure what's happened there, I'm sorry. So we've only got 2 names. I'm sure there's one other member who'd like to help out on this panel. Finance, anybody else? Chair, yes, I'm willing to put my name forward. Thank you, Councillor David Jones. So we've got 3 on the Finance Scrutiny panel. And the final one is education, and we need 4. You know, this is an important area as well. I know you're all school governors. It might be a good thing for you to be a member of this panel as well. So, okay, we've got 5 hands up now. So, Keith, first of all. Keith Roberts.
Keith Roberts. Arwan Wyn. Arwan, dwi'n just mynd a bod sydd ddim ar...
Arfon Wyn. Llio Angharad. And Alwen Watkin. So it's between Llio and Alwen Watkin. Llio, you're already on the Social Services Scrutiny panel. You want to be a member of this committee as well, and Alwen Watkin is also on the Social Services Scrutiny panel, and you want to be a member of the Education Scrutiny panel as well.
Wyn.
So Keith Roberts, Arfon Wyn, that's okay. Then Alwen Watkin. I'm sorry to interrupt, Chair, but I think the monitoring officer wants to come in. Lynn Ball. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you have 4 places and 5 applicants, so I'm afraid you'll have to vote unless someone is willing to withdraw, take their name back. So I can't see anybody taking their hands down. I'm sorry, but there's a message from Councillor Llio Angharad saying that she has withdrawn her name. Yes, I'm happy for those other 4 councillors to serve on the Education Scrutiny panel. So we've got Keith Roberts, Arfon Wyn, Alwen Watkin, and David Jones.
Gyda ni Arfon Wyn, Keith Roberts, David Jones. David, ti aros arno fo,
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd.
So, David, you're going to stay on the education panel, are you? Yes, thank you, Chair. Okay, we've got 4 members now. I'm sure the 4 of you will enjoy looking at different aspects of education.
Hyfforddiant ar hwn, cyn i chi bod yn siŵr Anwen, byddwn ni gael hyfforddiant cyn i'r paneli?
Will the members be receiving training before the panels meet? Yes, two things, just to confirm that there will be training and development programs for members. Just for clarity and accuracy, would it help if I read out the names of the members nominated, just so that the minutes are correct? Thank you. First of all, for the Social Services Scrutiny Panel and the Corporate Parenting Panel, we have Councillor Neville Evans, Councillor Shiang Haradowen, and Councillor Jackie Lewis. And then for the Finance Scrutiny Panel, we have Councillor Geraint Bebb, Councillor David Roberts, and Councillor Dyfed Wyn-Jones. And finally, the Education Scrutiny Panel, we have Councillor Keith Roberts, Councillor Arfon Wyn, Councillor Alwyn Watkin, and finally Councillor Dyfed Wyn-Jones. Thank you. So for the first panel, there are only 4 members. You only name 4 members. What about Alwyn Watkin? We need 4 on the Social Services panel. I'm afraid it's Councillor Neville Evans, Councillor Shiang Haradowen, Councillor Jackie Lewis, and Councillor Alwyn Watkin. So we have 4 on the Social Services panel. So those are the members who will put their names forward. And as I mentioned, you will be receiving training.
Right, okay.
So have we finished that item now, and when are you happy with that? Yes, thank you. Okay, so we've finished with item 4. We'll go on to item 5 now. The Forward Work Programme, and to present a report by the Scrutiny Manager. So will the Scrutiny Manager go through the report, please? Yes, thank you, Chair. This item is a standing item of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee, unless they are extraordinary meetings. You'll see an initial list of the Forward Work Programme, and then for the next meeting of the committee on the 19th of September, you'll see that you'll be looking at performance monitoring, corporate scorecard quarter 1, 2022-23, the council plan, the new council plan from 2022-23, and then you'll be monitoring the social services, and you'll receive a progress report from the Social Services Improvement Panel, and also a progress report from the Finance Scrutiny Panel. So those items have been confirmed for the next meeting of the committee on the 19th of September. Thank you. Thank you, Anwen. So,
contribution to the council's improvement plan. Yn pwysig i wneud yn siŵr bod ni'n dalt hwnna felly de.
It's important that we understand that there's a lot of things on the list already. Is there a way for members to put any items on the Forward Work Programme? Thank you for that question. There is a corporate process in terms of scheduling items for the executive and the scrutiny committees, And the idea is that you have a strategic alignment, that there is a read across between both forward work programmes. So that's what happens at a corporate level, so that the Scrutiny Committee look at key issues before they're considered by the executive. And of course, you will have an opportunity to discuss items in the monthly briefing sessions for elected members as well. If any members of this committee would like a word with me in terms of scrutinising any issues, you know, I'm happy to talk to you to see what we can do. As you know, the panel will be looking at issues in detail, and then they'll be bringing them back to this committee. You'll be working closely with members of the Scrutiny Committee chaired by Councillor Dylan Rees, the Partnership and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. Of course, we are a critical friend to officers and the executive. You know, we need to make sure that we make the most effective use of our resources to ensure that Anglesey citizens receive value from money from the work undertaken by the council. You know, if any officer wants to work with me, wants to word with me, I'm available on the phone at any time. I hope to visit different departments to see what's going on and to get an idea of how things work in the council. Just so that we understand what we're looking at. So thank you to the officers and members for coming here this afternoon. I'm just learning the job at the moment. You know, I'm pleased with what I've heard, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody on this committee, both officers and members, to make sure we don't miss anything out. And as I already said, just pick up the phone if you want to word with me.
Wedyn, diolch yn fawr Anwen, a gobeithio gan i gweithio yn nes I gilydd.
Thank you, Anwen.
O'ch chi wedi gweithio efo chi am blynyddoedd, a dwi'n siŵr newch chi job dda efo fi hefyd. Anyway, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd am fod yma.
So thank you